Hey, welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to everybody out there. Thanks to all of our viewers and our listeners. Again, it's Tuesday, and if it's Tuesday, we're talking real estate. Welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company and managing partner of Barry Saywitz Properties. And if it's one thing that I've learned in my 30-plus years of doing this, it's to look at both sides of the equation, get informed, and make an intelligent business decision. We're going to try and give you some insights and some input today to help you folks do that as well. We've got an exciting show. Today, our topic is we're going to talk a little residential real estate. But before we get going, I do want to do a shout-out. Our shout-out today is to all of the bankers out there who are lending money, especially the ones that lend me money. I have a bunch of meetings today, and I'll look forward to positive news and feedback. We'll try and keep those rates as low as we can. I do want to do a special shout out, since we have a special guest with us today, to my old pal Mick Ross, who is no longer with us. He was a big man with a big heart, and he is missed, and to him I say cheers. So with that, without getting too emotional, I do want to welcome our guest, Wendy Ross, principal broker, owner of VERACITY Real Estate here in Orange County. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Barry. Yeah.
So thanks for coming on. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while. This is a unique setup for us in that Wendy also has a show on OC Talk Radio that specifically talks about the residential side of the market. Mm-hmm. Ours focuses on the commercial. Today we're doing the switcheroo, and Wendy is my guest on her show, and then later on in the day I'm going to be her guest, and so we're each going to talk about hopefully something a little bit different and informative. And so Wendy, you've been a long-time resident and player in the real estate market here in Orange County, and you've seen a lot of changes back to the recession and then the run-up, and now here we are with this interesting set of circumstances that we have at hand. If we look back for a second before we look forward, how has the market changed from the recession the last time in people's, I guess, start with perception of where things are going in Orange County in general?
I'm not sure we have enough time. So
give me the short version.
All right, short version is this debacle in which we find ourselves is in no way, shape, or form even similar to the recession of 08-09. And I think the biggest difference that people forget, we get myopic, is that this is global. You know, this phenomenon, this housing shortage, this what we're calling now that the buzzword as of in the last 24 hours in media has been a housing recession, in that there is a dearth of homes available, which is something we've always seen here. We're seeing this as a global phenomenon. In 2008, we had shoddy lending practices that lent, pun intended, to this crisis, this free fall that we couldn't get out of because we had, smelly mortgage-backed securities tainting Wall Street, and we just took the American economy down, and the house of cards was built on homes that had no equity because they were doing zero down loans and neg-am loans and all this stuff. So it was impossible for the John and Jane Doe to dig themselves out of it. Now we have a situation where we have tightened our lending practices. Anyone who does own or did own real estate had skin in the game to begin with. Yeah. And then there was this crazy run up in values. Whether or not we believe it's real or artificial, there are varying opinions about that. It just enhanced their equity position. And what's interesting is that COVID was very emotional. Unlike the slide of 08 where people had no alternative but to sell or get out or bail out because the numbers simply didn't allow them to do otherwise. Now COVID is making people hunker down and cling to things for very different reasons.
And where are they going to go? I mean, if they bail out, what are you going to do?
Yeah. So the fear of dying, the fear of a pandemic was very real, and it prevented a lot of people from putting the homes on the market. And then those who did, to your point, they had to find somewhere else to live, and then of course the Fed's well-intended or not, whatever, dropping interest rates to where the Fed funds rate was zero for a long time, a protracted period of time, led to people getting mortgages that now they're unlikely to give up willingly.
Yeah, and we've talked about this offline, but the perception to me is probably as big, if not bigger, than the data and the statistics and the reality. And the reason is the average person who owns a home mostly only cares about their own home and doesn't really care about other people's homes,
Right.
and then also compares their home to the neighbor or what happened around them, and then elevates it to another level. And so the relativity of I could have gotten a mortgage for 2.5 or 3%, and now I can't. It sounds like the world's in a much worse place, when in reality that 2.5 or 3 was an anomaly. For
Correct.
for 50 years, it was the lowest rate in the last 50 years.
Well, in recorded history, yeah, it's just, and before technology, it wasn't viable. I mean, technology really has done a lot to compress rates, and we've seen. I mean, markets. We communicate with Wall Street from the West Coast and around the world, for various foreign markets, in this immediacy that we didn't have before. So interest rates, they flex, they move multiple times a day, but we don't see it, boots on the ground. But that's what's happening. So to have an interest rate that's that suppressed for that long, that was an anomaly that can never be repeated, and it was unhealthy then. I can't believe we left it there so long.
Yeah, and I think what it leads to in today's environment is now you have interest rates much higher, could be double of what somebody has a current rate at. And so I talked to even some of my own friends who said, well, I was going to trade up. I was going to sell my house. I was going to get an equity line on my house and go buy a second home or a vacation home.
Right.
But now it's twice the interest rate, so my payment is twice as high.
Right.
And then they don't do it. So then they don't move. They don't trade up. They don't put on the market, which leads back to this supply-demand issue.
Exactly. And if I had $1 for every person that just wanted to stone me for saying this, and I'm just going to say it again, we are going to have a shortage of housing inventory for at least the next year, possibly two.
Yeah, on the housing side, and you already have it on the apartment side. There is a general housing issue. So if you have a house, you might want to hold on to it for the time being. If you need another place because you have to do it, you need a bigger place, or you can't afford where you're at, or whatever the case is, then you're going to have some challenges sort of navigating the economy around you and the rates and the market.
And there's enough wealth here, though. We all know this. There's enough wealth in Orange County that people who really do need to move for whatever reason, they're not selling the departure home. They're keeping it as a rental. It's too attractive. The numbers are too good.
Yes, and especially if I have a super cheap interest rate.
Exactly.
Why would I
my
give that
point.
up?
Exactly my point. It's
Yeah.
painful to give it up, and they're just not going to.
So that leads me back to a discussion that we've had on other shows, which is there's not I don't want to be a doomsdayer, but there's not a lot of good things going on. The stock market tanked yesterday. You still have war. You still have supply chain issues. You have rising interest rates. You have a tough employment market where you can't find companies can't find people to work. So I could make a long list, but does the supply demand piece of it, for lack of a better word, trump all the other bad things that are going on in the market? Is the fact that there's limited supply and limited inventory going to prop up the values of the homes because there's just not a lot of stuff out there in the market?
Regrettably, yes. And I don't know, and I want to qualify this. It's not going to prop them up in that I don't think they're going to continue to increase anywhere near the rate at which they were, but they're not going to fall. And the buyers are sitting back hearing these blaring headlines going, home sales are crashing, home sales are plummeting, and they think that means home prices are falling, and that is not what it means. So there's this mentality, and the tail is starting to wag the dog, because buyers are writing really low offers, and they're getting supremely frustrated when sellers are going, F you.
Right. And in the converse of that is if you rewound 6 months ago, those same buyers were getting outbid and had multiple bids and were having to overbid, and now it's flipped, and then you're still not able to make a deal because you have a
Right.
disconnect.
Right. And it's fascinating how there's so many information sources out there, and people are getting the information that they want. They're seeking the answers that they want to hear, and buyers are doing it. Buyers are hearing the sky is falling, and sellers are hearing there's no inventory, so you're holding, all the chips. And the truth is we're getting closer to parity, but it's a very frustrating, maddening parity.
Well, and when there's a disconnect between buyers and sellers, when there's a flux in the market, it's hard to get people on the same page. I don't care if it's a commercial deal or residential deal. You have perceptions of where a deal gets made, and my perception is not the same as the other guy. So I'll pick a number. If I was trying to sell my house for $1 million, in a normal market, you might ask $1 million and get $950. In a ridiculous market 6 months ago, you might ask $1 million and get $1.2 million.
Exactly.
And so now, if my seller is saying, hey, I was at $1 million, I should have at least got $1 million, if not more. Somebody's hitting me below the belt at 900,000 or 950. I don't want to do it. And now you have a tough time making a deal, which makes it, to me, that much more difficult on the broker, because you're trying to educate the client and you have this moving market and you have a client who's going, how come you can't get me what I want?
You've nailed it. You've absolutely nailed it. And people on both sides of the fence, whenever the market moves, has their own, idea of which way it's moving, and how much leverage that gives them.
And when you're talking to your own clients or potential clients out there, it seems to me it would be a difficult conversation. Some people get it and they have a reason to sell and they bought it super cheap, and whatever number they get, it's a home run. And so they're not hanging out for last dollar. But it seems like there's other people out there that have this number in their head.
Oh, for
and
sure.
you're like, hey, we're not going to get that. I'll go try it. I'll do what you want. But now I'm spending more time. I'm spending more effort. You're not getting what you want, and it's not there, but you have to prove to the seller that the market's not there.
It's a difficult conversation to have with someone, to say, you're not going to get what your neighbor got. That was yesterday, and yesterday's gone.
Right.
Regrettably it is.
And if you don't make a deal in the next 60 or 90 days, because here we are at the end of August, if you get to November, who's buying houses November and December historically? Those people are people that got bonuses, that pulled out of the stock market and got some cash. It's not a heavy month for people buying Christmas presents as a house. And you have rates continuing to rise, and now the threat of raising rates 2-3 more times. You've hit the peak, right?
Yeah, we were
you need to
targeted
get
for
out.
7 this year, and we're not there yet, for sure.
Yeah. And so to me, if I was a seller, there ought to be a sense of urgency.
There should be. And it's interesting. My sellers, thankfully, are reasonable people, but the conversations have still been difficult. I have had to sit them down sometimes like children and say, no, stop with the tantrum. It's not going to change anything. What you want, while I respect that's what you want, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is also, again, depending upon the price point of the house, there is this issue. Certainly we see it on the commercial side, certainty of close, right? I have a real person with real money who's good to go. They don't need to get an appraisal. They don't need to go to the bank for the loan. They're not trying to get too creative and string it out. Take the deal. It's a bird in the hand. And sometimes people get greedy or stubborn.
Oh, yeah.
And then they blow a deal. And
Yeah.
we have a client that did that, and he's like, I should have taken that deal 3 months ago. I said, well, I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so.
We
Right?
tried to tell you,
Yep.
and you didn't want to listen to us. And that's the challenge, because as advisors, all we can do is advise.
Right.
In the end, it's their decision.
And the frustrating thing, it would seem to me, is putting on the broker hat, is then they go, well, forget it then. I'm not going to sell it. I'm going to rent it. And then you got no money.
Yes.
Right? And then
That's just my favorite.
and then you have to put a smile on and go, okay, well, call me when you're ready. And then you just wasted a bunch of time.
Oh, yeah. And that's exactly what's been happening since COVID. I mean, there are people who have been vacillating about what they want to do and where they want to go, and they couldn't find something, and I was saying, do you not understand, you people, you sellers who can't find what you want? You're not putting your home on the market is creating the problem for all of you.
Yeah.
So if you all just put your homes on the market, then you would all have something else to buy. But you're creating your own drama here.
But the selfish answer is, I'm not going to put mine on the market till I find what I want. And then you have this
Exactly.
chicken and the egg thing.
Exactly. And there's enough money that they can afford to buy the next house without selling the departure home. And that's the painful part of being in an affluent community like this.
Yeah.
So I sit back and I laugh, and I'm like, all right, fine, I'm going to sell some stock, and I'm going to have a year where I'm just not going to sell as much, but the entertainment value is high.
Yeah, and the volume of what's going on, I think the expectation is it certainly is going to be less going forward than it has been in the past. I mean, is that safe to say?
In terms of volume sold?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
For
I mean,
sure.
and I think you're seeing it with escrow companies and title companies laying people off. They're
yeah.
expecting it and they're feeling it.
Oh, God, yeah. We're already down almost 21% in terms of numbers sold this July over last July. The reduction in volume is profound, especially when you consider that we came into COVID with 40 and 50% less inventory than normal. And now we're shaving another 20% off of that. We're at historically low numbers of homes reselling and historically high numbers of people getting their real estate licenses, which is just joyful for me.
Yeah, and that, I think, is a whole nother wave that's coming, because we've seen it in the past where there's this thinning of the competition, where when the market is hot, I really, for lack of a better word, don't need to be smart. I can just hold up my hand. I can sell my own house. I can rent my own apartment. I bought my house. I made a bunch of money. All of a sudden, I'm a real estate expert. And any person who wanted a part-time job all of a sudden now can sell a home.
Absolutely. Let's
And-
hope for the culling of the herd now,
Right.
shall we?
So as the market gets more difficult to navigate,
Mm-hmm.
right, and as the cream of the crop, the people that are smart, that understand it, float to the top, like yourself and your crew, there is a separation between the seasoned real estate people and then just anybody who can throw up a sign.
From your lips to God's ears,
Yeah,
Barry.
yeah, I pray for those days because it happens on the commercial side too.
I'm sure. I have seen some of these young bucks who get into the commercial business and they just think that they're all that in a bag of chips. And I'm like, no, you were born to the right family, darling. Just hang in there.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that it's not in some instances what you know, it's who you know.
Oh, totally.
But it only goes so far.
Sure.
And so it'll be interesting to see how things go. I guess back to the interest rate conversation. So where do you think it's going? I mean, we're talking another 50 or 75 basis points, I think, for sure, in the next couple of weeks. And I read something this morning that they're saying that the reason that the stock market is still continuing to struggle, yesterday was a tough day, is because no one believes that the Fed has their arms around inflation. And while they did raise the rates, it's not enough.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is a very politically divided conversation, but I think we forget that we have kicked the can of inflation down the road for 40 plus years. This was coming home to roost. I mean, like it or not, we had to deal with this eventually, and here we are. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Feds finally did just suck it up and continue with the rate hikes that they had promised us. We've got 3 more left of the 7. I think we only had 4, right? So, we're due for that. Our market, especially here in Orange County, is already so suppressed. It's not going to make a damn bit of difference because the people who have the money, who are fairly rate inured, they're going to do what they're going to do. And the rest of the people are going to sit here and cry in their milk and say, I'm not getting what I want. And this will just be another reason for them to complain they're not getting what they want. So honestly, I kind of hope that they do, because this would be the time where it's going to just sort of fall on deaf ears. It's going to do what it's going to do to the rest of the economy. And our real estate market is going to be the frozen tundra until probably March.
Yeah, and the guy who refinanced his house and got a super cheap rate and locked
doesn't
it
care.
in, he sits and smiles and says,
Right.
I'm just going to do nothing.
Right. And the few deals that we do put together, and trust me, we're going to be selling 60% fewer homes than normal. I mean, that regrettably is our normal. I'm preaching austerity to my team. It's like batten down the hatches, pay down your credit cards, lose the extra expenses that you don't have to have, because it's going to suck. It's going to suck until mid next year, but that's okay. We'll be there mid next year. But yeah, the few deals that we do call together are going to involve sellers prepaying a whole bunch of discount points to get those rates down for the few buyers that are willing to come to the table.
Do you think it's realistic that you're going to have home rates in the 7s and the 8s in a very short period of time?
I think that home rates may go into the 7s, but they're not going to stay there. Going back to 2008, well, actually going back to when the FICO score was just being beta tested. I was in Silicon Valley at the time. We all talked about the future of interest rates and technology's influence on interest rates, and especially after 2008 and that meltdown and the general correction, if you will. Pretty much everyone agreed that mortgage rates in the U.S. are going to bump around the 6% range going forward.
Which is where it was,
Right.
right before the recession.
And that was a very attractive rate. I mean, 6% in our experience, having been in the industry since the 80s. I mean, I remember when it was 12%. 6% was a gift.
Yeah.
3% was obscene. 2% was like I was pulling my hair out because I couldn't wrap my brain around it. So I expect our normal is going to be in the 6s. If we have a really good shift in the market and things go down to 5, people are going to be running to do rate locks. Do I think that we're going to hit 7%? Possibly, but just for a minute. I don't think it's going to hang around there. I don't think that the markets will tolerate it. Unfortunately, we're spoiled babies, and other things are going to have to give. But, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's other things still on the horizon that are cause for concern. You still have supply chain issues. You still have gas issues. And then you still have a very volatile stock market where you're just not out of the woods, and it's tied to where people see the economy going. So until there is, in my opinion, a perception that inflation is under control and you're past this bubble that we're sort of in, which we're not, then you're not going to see the stock market get any sort of continued traction. And they were talking about like sort of a false hope for the last couple of weeks. The market had been running up. People were feeling pretty good yesterday, sort of sucked and retreated.
Out came the rug.
Right. So let's dive into the market itself. To me, there's really 3 sort of levels of home in terms of prices. You have sort of, in Orange County, we're an anomaly, I think, to most of the rest of the country.
We really are.
Because you're just in a totally different price point than most of the rest of the country. But moderately home prices $1 million or under, middle tier prices $1 million to $3 million, and then high end homes above $3 million.
Right.
Let's start with the lower stuff, moderate, if you will. That market to me seems like there's still high demand. The problem is, as the interest rates go up, it really has a sharp impact on people's capacity to pay because they are sensitive to the rate and they are sensitive to the payment. But do you see that slowing down also?
No, I don't, because about 40% of the buyers in that market are investors. And I get probably 2 to 3 emails or text messages a day from flippers that are looking, the bottom feeders. So, I mean, don't forget, when the stock market gets nutty, what do people do? They move it into dirt.
Yeah.
So we still see a lot of people who are investors who are investing in dirt, and that at that lower level strata, if you will, $1 million and under, is the most attractive for a rental property, and it's going to be the one that cash flows the best.
Yeah, and as long as those people are either buying for cash or big down payments, they're not as rate sensitive.
Correct.
And also, as an investor myself, I don't mind paying an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on a property while I prefer not to do it. It's not going to make or break me. Where the first-time home buyer gets emotional about it, and they're like, wait a minute, I have to pay extra for this?
And even in that strata, if you will, these buyers want to believe the prices are crashing. They fervently want to believe it. So they're starting to write really stupid low offers, making it easier for the cash investors to come in and go, I'll give you another $20,000 and close in 3 weeks. Done.
Right, because now, look, as a broker, you've already seen it, right? I don't have 10 offers. I've got 1 or 2, and I need to make them happen.
Yeah. So the stability in that section of the market, that sector of the market, is unquestionable.
I also think in that lower priced environment, the people who aren't, a lot of them who aren't going and buying, they will continue to rent. And so as an apartment guy, we have a lot of people that say, I want to buy a house. I don't want to sign a 1-year lease. And I said, look, if you buy the house, it's not a problem. We'll work with you. We'll help you either rent the place that you're in, or we have a wait list in some instances. And so I wouldn't sweat it. And I'm not so convinced you're going to find a place tomorrow. Right. And so you could blink and it'll be another year. What that does then is that continues to put upward pressure on the rents in the apartment market.
And I think people forget about this, and you certainly remember, is during the 08-09 crash, what happened to rental rates? They skyrocketed. Landlords made a killing because people had to live somewhere.
Yeah.
And
so and you're not seeing, at least not yet, because you had very limited construction during the pandemic. So there's more coming, but
not enough. I mean, because to your point before, the supply chain issues are actually directly affecting building.
Right. Well, and also as an apartment investor and developer, when you build new stuff, it's really nice. So you are charging the higher end of the spectrum. So for existing product, you're not hurt by that because it's really expensive. And as long as you're a cut below, you'll be okay.
Right.
So let's move to, we only have a couple of minutes left, believe it or not, but let's move to that middle tier market. And how are those the people that are moving up? I had $1 million house, I want to buy a $2 million house. I had a $2 million house, I want to buy a $3 million house. And what happens to them in this market?
Those are the people who are most squeezed right now. Those are the people who are most rate sensitive, because Orange County, most people here live beyond their means. They do. The credit cards are maxed, they're leasing their cars, and so these people, when they're hit with a 5% interest rate versus a 3% interest rate,
it's big.
It's a massive hit. And in many cases, friends of mine bought a new build from the Irvine company, and they weren't allowed to lock in their rate for whatever reason. I wasn't involved. It was their choice. By the time they got to lock in the rate on their new build, because it was ready to give the occupancy cert, their housing payment went up $20,000 a year. That's a massive increase. So these people who are in between the $1 and $3 million range are the most directly impacted by this, and they're having the biggest trouble.
Yeah, and I think to me, those are the people that go, hey, I'll just stay where I'm at. I'm not going to move up.
Exactly. I'm throwing in the towel. I'm coming off the market.
Yeah. And then you go to the higher end homes. To me, it seems like those people would be least impacted by rate sensitivity, but most impacted by the fact that I really don't feel like just ridiculously overpaying for a number that's made up. So you get into a home that is $5 million or more, and there's not a lot of logic to the price other than, hey, I just made up this number and this is what it is.
Right. We sold more $5 million and up homes in Orange County in the last 30 months than ever in the history. And I mean by like 5 times. It was insane. Everybody and their dog wanted to move to the beach and get a yacht and escape the pandemic.
That's what I want.
And there's only so many beaches in the world.
So I think that those higher end home prices will either be dictated by the fact that people don't really care so much about the price and will pay it, or the number is a stupid number, and then if nobody pays it, then it was still just a completely made up number. I saw an article, Mark Wahlberg in Beverly Hills put his house on the market, and it's a 30,000 square foot house, and I'm sure it's a fabulous mansion for $87 million.
Right.
And in his neighborhood, the highest comp was like $40 million, right? And so you more than doubled it.
Right.
Even if he took a haircut to $60 million, it's a good payday for him, right?
And you're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of these mega mansions. They aren't getting their price. Fewer and fewer of them are going to sell. And people, again, will interpret that as the sky is falling. We're just not going to sell 5 times as many super luxury homes. It's okay. We're returning to normal. That's okay.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, sort of in summary, is the interest rate run up, the lack of volume, the time on market, while they are all negative things relative to yesterday, relative to the peak, they're not ridiculous in the sense of what is normal in the marketplace.
30 to 60 days on market is normal. 5 to 6% interest rate is normal. Yeah.
So take a deep breath for those folks out there and
Exactly.
relax.
Take a beat.
And so what are you telling people that are thinking about selling?
If you need to sell, you need to go somewhere else, do it. And honestly, probably sooner is better because there's just going to be more, misunderstood media. Just do it now. Buyers want
Hire
to go.
Wendy and do it quick, right?
There you go.
And what about the people that are looking and buying? Do I wait? The tough part is if the market comes down and prices come down, rates may go up. I may get no traction.
That's what I'm telling him. And also, why are you buying? Is it about work? Is it about school? Is it about commute? Is it about you have to have one story because there's a disability? Why are you buying? And if the need to buy outweighs the cost of waiting, then of course you need to buy something now. In some cases, the answer is wait, and in others it's not because they're not saving money. If it's about saving money for a down payment, in this environment, in this economy, you're really functionally not going to. So what are you waiting for?
Yeah. So if you're buying, I'd get out there and try and buy. Call Wendy. If you're selling, call Wendy. I think that's the simple answer. So how can people reach you, Wendy?
I'm shameless. It's so easy to find me. Just call me or text me. 949-870-2424.
And the website?
RealVeracity.com. That's RealVeracity.com.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for sharing the insights. I appreciate you having coming on the show. We've been talking about it for a while, and it's certainly a pertinent topic and will continue to be one as we go forward. And so we'll see how it plays out. But thanks for your thoughts and your insights,
Thanks
and
for
much
having me.
continued success to you and your company.
Likewise. Thanks, Barry.
Yeah. So I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company. For those who have tuned in, thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. We will see you next week. I want to thank all the folks here at OC Talk Radio, Paul, Sophia, the rest of the team. Thanks for all your hard work. If it's Tuesday, we'll see you, we'll hear you, or you'll hear us. It's more Let's Talk Real Estate. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.